Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mr. TARDIS and we're back here for another Ninth Doctor adventure set in the Powell estate. Over the past few months we've had some Ninth Doctor and Rose Tyler adventures starring Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper, and we had a trilogy of Powell estate set stories. Then we had Cloud 8, which was a phenomenal story that I really recommend, that set off world. But unfortunately we are now once again back to the Powell estate. However, in Pandemonium we're starting to lay some groundwork as to what could be a potential series arc here, and a reason why we keep on coming back to this particular time in this particular place. And by the sounds of it, it could not be good, as in, you know, it could be quite apocalyptic, but we'll have to see what the rest of the range does over the coming months. But as for Pandemonium, this is written by Catherine Armitage, and this is not her first foray into the Ninth Doctor adventures. You may remember she penned the A Beautiful Game story from the 2023 box set Pioneers, which I thought was really strong. This whole box set's really good, but I really remember A Beautiful Game being a really strong story. I really enjoyed that one, so I was looking forward to Pandemonium. However, while listening to it, I kind of got the sense that there really is a ceiling on how good these types of stories set in the Powell estate can be, especially when you have so many of them going back to back, and so many of them dealing with very similar concepts and very similar themes. But anyway, let me back up. So Pandemonium, once again, takes place in 2006 Powell estate, and a bunch of historical figures have somehow invaded the estate, and these are people who have some sort of tangential link to the area. You've got Violet Sasbo, who's a French agent from World War II, who was tortured by Germans behind enemy lines for over a year. You have Samuel Pepys, who's a 17th century politician, and you also have Edith Nesbit, who harasses Jackie Tyler in a really funny subplot. She was a ardent socialist and feminist campaigner, and also the author of The Railway Children, and cited as the creator of modern children's fantasy. And of course the Ninth Doctor, played by Christopher Eccleston, is a massive fanboy for Edith Nesbit, which I thought was a really fun detail. The Doctor and Rose consult local historian Glenn, played by Clive Hayward, who has kept essentially a diary, a book of historical figures who are related to the estate, and it seems to be revolving around this book where all these time travel anomalies are coming from. However, Rose does not want to stop these time travel anomalies from happening, even though they could be the sign of an invasion from the dawn of time, and she wants to know first if somebody like her father is able to also come from the past. However, the Ninth Doctor, of course, wants to stop that from happening, because as we've established in the past, these Ninth Doctor adventures with Rose Tyler take place between Father's Day and The Empty Child, so of course Pete Tyler is on Rose Tyler's mind.
That's why the TARDIS refused to take Sam back to the 17th century, because he's a product of here and now.
But didn't the Sonic register them as being from the past?
You're right. Have you got Glenn's notes?
Yeah.
What time periods were you looking at?
The Celt arrived first, then 2 Romans, 4 from the 10th century, 6th from the 11th.
The most recent are 20th century. Edith is Edwardian, Violette is Second World War.
They're arriving in the order of when they died. But that makes sense, right?
Time isn't linear. There's no reason they should arrive in order relative to us, yet the arrivals are getting more recent and frequent, which suggests something is moving towards us through time and gaining momentum.
Rosie! Rosie!
I thought you hated people calling you Rosie.
Glenn gets a free pass. Best babysitter ever. Let me watch Top of the Pops and made real hot chocolate. You all right, Glenn?
Rosie, it's wonderful! Look who it is! Look who's come back to me!
Hello?
Hi.
It's Paul! My own Paul, just as he was.
Lovely to meet you, Rosie.
Yeah. Paul.
Pandemonium is a solid pseudo-historical story. It's probably the closest to a historical story that you can do with this particular format of adventures within the Powell estate, and I am glad that Catherine Armitage did do some pretty deep cuts when it comes to historical figures in this story. She could have gone for the really easy layups like Winston Churchill or some other big historical names, but no, she actually went a bit more obscure with these references, which I really appreciated. It actually added a pretty unique flavour to the story. And as usual, I think the performance performances are really strong between Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper. I think they continue to have really great chemistry, and I do like the pseudo, adopted daughter dynamic that the Ninth Doctor has with Rose here. And I'm glad that these stories are diving into the thorny dynamic and the tension that's between the Doctor and Rose after the events of Father's Day. I think that's a really good thing. However, Pandemonium is not the first story in this range to do that. I think there was a couple of references in Dare You, and A Snare was kind of a lot about that as well. And it was when I was listening to what I think is the best scene in Pandemonium that I realised one of the problems with basing so much of the drama around Pete Tyler in these Ninth Doctor audios. The scene in question is Rose talking to Jackie Tyler about whether or not one of the historical figures who could come back could be her dad, and Camille Coduri plays the scene really, really effectively. It kind of seems like Jackie is just immediately cutting off the idea that no, we leave that in the past, we don't talk about that, we don't think about that. And I think it's a combination of the text and how Camille Coduri plays it. You sense this really repressed tension and how Jackie Tyler has really dug these emotions deep down in her subconscious over the past 18 to 19 years since Pete died, and she just really does not want to go there. It's the best scene of the audio, but it kind of reminded me that I think there really is a ceiling on how much you can address the Doctor and Rose dynamic when it comes to Pete Tyler's death, especially if you're going to go to that well so many times. And a big part of that is because you can't keep on going back to this without ultimately detracting from the scene in The Parting of the Ways at the end of Series 1, where Rose confronts Jackie about it and says, the Doctor took me back in time and I met Dad. Like, she can't allude to that here, because that has to be the moment when she admits to Jackie that she's gone back in time and met him. That's the card that she pulls in that moment. So you can't play it earlier, otherwise you negate that scene, that pivotal scene in the finale. So as a result, how deep in this topic can you really go? How much drama can you really mine here without just outright getting repetitive? And I don't think it's Catherine Armitage's fault. We are just using different writers to mine the same drama here, and I think that's a bit of a shame. Like I said, that scene with Rose and Jackie, for my money, is the best scene of the story, but what happens if in a couple of episodes' time we go back to the similar source material again? I think it will end up undercutting and negating the impact of that scene in Pandemonium, because what else are you going to do with the Ninth Doctor, Rose and Jackie shortly after the events of Father's Day? I think that they're really limiting themselves with these Ninth Doctor stories, not just in setting, of course, with the Powell Estate. I don't think it's a coincidence that the moment we leave the Powell Estate in Cloud 8, the quality immediately leapfrogs over everything else in the range so far. But if you are wanting to go back to this same setting over and over again, you need to change what the drama's about, and they're not really doing that here, which is a shame. But outside of that, when it comes to the actual plot itself of Pandemonium, I think that the story took some decent turns, and I think that it had some effective emotional beats, particularly when it comes to Glenn, whose partner Paul passed away 40 years ago, and he's one of the historical figures who comes back via this book that he's been keeping. And I think there were some really effective scenes where Paul died during a time when he had to be in the closet and it was illegal for same-sex relationships, but now in 2006 England they can have civil partnerships. So Glenn is really happy that he can actually be out in the open with the person that he loves, even if it is like a monkey's paw style curse. I thought that was a really, really nice subplot, and I think that Glenn plays the ending scene really, really beautifully, but there was nothing in that subplot that made me feel, wow, this really was worth our 4th trip to the Powell Estate. And unfortunately, Pandemonium ends on a sort of cliffhanger ending, indicating that there is some ongoing threat, there is something that is continually bringing the Ninth Doctor and Rose back to the Powell Estate, and we already know that the next story in this range, 13 O'Clock by Robert Valentine, yeah, we're going back to the Powell Estate, we're going into the ominous Flat 13, honestly, I bear no resentment or ill will towards the writers of this range, but God, let them fly. Robert Valentine is a very, very good writer. I was only singing his praises the other month for his titular Ministry of Death story in the 4th Doctor box set, Ministry of Death, but I really think there's a ceiling to how good these stories can be if we're just going to be locked to this setting and to this time over and over and over again. Honestly, maybe it's because it's the hottest day of the year so far that I'm recording this video, but I am kind of losing patience for it, unfortunately. But judged on its own, just somehow in its own bubble as just an hour-long audio story from Big Finish with the Ninth Doctor and Rose, yeah, Pandemonium's fine. Yeah, it's got some effective moments of drama. Like I said, I think Camille Coduri is really terrific in this story, but apart from that, it was fine. It was all right. That's kind of all you're going to get from me, unfortunately. But that's my review of the Ninth Doctor Adventures Pandemonium. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hype the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. And folks, I'll see you all next time.